agenda, we will be a
Reminder
tech team.
everybody to mute too.
Yeah, hopefully when we are presenting, that people can mute, please. Okay. So again, looking at this agenda, we are going to have a tech team approach to walk through the slides today. And at the end, we'll have some time for discussion and also Q&A. In addition to making a couple of quick announcements. But in the meanwhile, you're also welcome to ask questions along the way. I first would like to thank Bruce Claren for putting together this set of slides for this meeting. I believe you all know Bruce, being one of the most experienced ESIP member, including serving as the past president, the Constitution and Bylaw Chair, as well as the Foundation Board member. He is really most qualified to give us a bit of a ESIP history that will help set the stage. Can you go to the next slide, please? So, Bruce, it's all yours.
Okay, so I'm just going to run to the start of how we got to where we are. And a couple of people on the line, at least, were there at the time. So Fru and Tamara, I know we've all tried to forget those days in the antediluvial period of ESIP, but ESIP was born as a collective of funded projects in 1998, and it took us a while, but we got through the initial governance phase internally, and during those early years, any monies that had to be spent were parceled out among the various cooperative agreements as add-on funds to those agreements, which was very clumsy for NASA, and NASA really wanted us to have a single back office. So, and we were also just new at this whole ESIP business. So we had several choices. We could, let one of the ESIP, universities take the back office, and other ESIPs didn't like that. We got a bid from a private company that we thought was too high. We thought, well, we'll just incorporate ourselves, and some of the ESIP said, well, my cooperative agreement doesn't say anything about me joining an actual organization, so we'll have to rewrite my cooperative agreement. So we decided not to do that. And finally, we hit on starting our own little foundation, and so in 2001 and 2002, we created the foundation as the office supports in a single place where funds could be collected and spent, and staff could be hired. And what happened then was that the ESIP XCOM elected officers would become the board members, or at least the majority of the board members. And for 12 years, we ran basically as this dual organization. And the weird part about it was that the ESIP XCOM, working with the assembly and the membership, would decide on the program and would do a lot of the work and determine the budget and vote on it. And then the board would have to meet and do the same vote on the budget and some other things. So we were doing double duty, and we always did, as Emily said, had to explain why is there a foundation and what's the difference between the foundation and the federation. And so that's kind of how we got set up with this dual organization. And it was a bit of an ad hoc solution. It is what I'd like to call a convenient fiction. And then in like 2013, 2014, and there was an MOU that connected the two, and that took a while to get together, but we still have this MOU. In 2013-14, we had some legal advice, and I think I'm going to pass it on to Carl now to talk about this phase of it. Carl?
Sure. Yeah, and as this was during the second year of my ESIP presidency, and then continued into sort of the subsequent years, in that as the foundation, as the success of ESIP in its partnership model or very close collaborative model with the foundation had been observed by other organizations. There were other organizations that were trying to figure out how they could potentially work with the Foundation for Earth Science to support their work as well. And as a part of that, we we had both discussions internally with the Foundation Board and the ESIP leadership, who were a part of the board at that time. We looked at the wisdom of expanding the services, support services of the foundation outside of supporting the ESIP Federation. But as a part of that, we also sought some legal advice, which a byproduct of which was basically a recommendation that we were in a situation where the integration of the elected ESIP leadership, the president, vice president, and other officers, as a part of the foundation board of directors, constituted a conflict of interest in terms of potentially conflicting loyalties between the ESIP Federation and the foundation. That turned out to be, and based on that legal recommendation, we then went through a process over the next 2 years of essentially separating the leadership model between the Federation and the Foundation, where we no longer had the elected ESIP leadership participating on the board of directors for the Foundation. This had a number of significant unintended consequences, one of the major ones being the essentially dissolution of what had been an implicit shared governance model between the Foundation and the Federation. Roll the clock forward a couple of years, we received some additional legal advice, and in further conversations with the lawyers determined that there was a false premise that led to the suggested conflict of interest in terms of the elected officers of the ESIP Federation serving on the board. And based on that false premise, or the recognition of that false premise, we then learned that we could indeed actually have the shared governance model that we had lived happily under for 12 years. And we very quickly went back to a model where the foundation board did have included on the board a number of the elected ESIP leadership positions. And that's the state where we are right now, but we still currently exist as two organizations that are tightly linked to each other through this shared governance model, through joint participation in the ESIP leadership and the board for the foundation. And I'll talk a little bit more about the responsibilities of the board a little bit later in the presentation, but that's sort of the large circle that we've come around over the last 3 years or so, coming back to what we're looking at as not just a shared governance model that is the same as what we enjoyed prior to 2013, but actually a more streamlined and unified organization that did not exist at that point. And that's essentially what the rest of this presentation and discussion is going to be about.
Okay, thanks, Carl. I'll just take it from there. So we talk about 2013 to 14 and moving on to 2015 to 16. So last year in 2015, ESIP began a self-evaluation through Burnett and Williamson's, a reputable consulting firm. The firm researched ESIP's current and also anticipated organizational capacity needs, conducted key stakeholders phone interviews, as well as ESIP-wide survey that really drew perspective from the entire community. There was no surprise that their findings were actually really highly positive, affirming that ESIP is really well respected and also has a reputation that if you want to get something resolved or is actually done, you go to ESIP. So it's really an organization of which we all can be proud of to be a part of. So moving forward this year, the Foundation Board and ESIP Executive Committee met 1.5 days right before the summer meetings to collectively work through those information gathered by the evaluation. The foremost conclusion of that meeting is the recommendation of a single membership 501c3 organization, namely the Federation of Earth Science Information Partners. So that really leads to where we are today. A set of resolutions by the membership of ESIP was being released to you for discussion. We want to provide all the information you need and answer all the questions you might have, and also allow time for you to digest before casting your votes. Collectively, you have the ownership and also the power to move this proposal forward. So, next slide, please. We just want to assure you that this merger will not alter ESIP's mission. The strategic plan and its 4 key strategic goals approved by you at last January's assembly meetings are committed without change. If anything different at all, I can only envision really positive effects on perhaps how the underlying goal-oriented tasks and actions will be carried out more effectively under a single and simplified organizational structures. So next slide, please. And let me hand this back to Bruce to describe what are the changes and who will be affected.
Yeah, so this is, I'm going to go through a little bit of the documentation that we use as governance docs currently and what the new ones will be, and then on the social side of it, how we organize ourselves as memberships and leadership. So this is our current situation. So we have the Constitution and bylaws, which are internal governance, and then we have this MOU to the foundation, and the foundation has legal footing as a corporation, and they have legal bylaws that are that they run by, and which are the style of bylaws that that any corporation would use. Next slide. So what we would have now is ESIP would have legal footing with a document that's called the bylaws, which is what they have to be. So we're going to change the names of the Constitution and bylaws into policies and procedures, and do some streamlining of those documents after the winter meeting, and those will be our internal governance documents again, and will be spell out how you form committees and working groups, and just like it is now. Very few changes need to be made. We don't want to have 2 documents called bylaws. That would get confusing. Next slide. So currently, we have these 2 organizations, and you're probably all familiar with this, and the foundation has a board, and it hires the executive director who hires the staff, and then there's the MOU. And then ESIP has the membership, and has assembly meetings of the membership and elects the executive committee, and that's for decision making. And then ESIP, the assembly representatives also belong to membership or member organizations, and they have their own data users, which are part of the larger ESIP community. And as Carl was saying, the board and staff have traditionally had, a history of being tightly linked with ESIP, and so it's the changes are not going to be dramatic at all. So the next slide. So what will happen now is that the membership in the assembly meetings or online votes will elect what we're calling the program committee, and the program committee is the executive committee, basically, and then some of those members will be on the board of directors, and the reason that we're not going to have why we're renaming the executive committee the program committee is that the board of directors may have its own small executive group called an executive committee, and we don't want confusion there. And it's a single organization, which is a 501c3. And then the board of directors, again, hires the executive director, who hires the staff, and the staff serves the federation. And legally reports to the board of directors. And then we have the membership organizations and the community at large, as before. Next slide, please. So I'm going to pass this on to Carl. Is that all right, Carl? You still there?
Sure. Yeah, I just needed to unmute myself. So in many respects, as Bruce was just describing, this is sort of a variation on everything old is new again, as the responsibilities of the board of directors remain largely the same in terms of having some key legal fiduciary responsibilities that the board of directors for any nonprofit corporation have in terms of responsibility for the budget, responsibility for the oversight of the executive director, the hiring and evaluation of the executive director, and basically handling the activities that are related to the legal operation of the foundation. And as I alluded to earlier, the board members that are essentially drawn from the elected leadership, that this is the leadership elected by the assembly, is very much what we had before in terms of the assembly electing the president, vice president, the partnership chair, nomination chair, finance chair, and what had previously been known as constitution and bylaws, and we're now referring to as a governance chair, again for an attempt to reduce confusion. Those are positions elected by the assembly that will have positions on the board, and given the size of the board, we also have three additional at-large board members that the assembly can also elect, where those board members will essentially have 2-year terms that are aligned with our current 2-year term model, at least for some of the elected officials. So in many respects, the roles and responsibilities are not changing significantly from what we had prior to the division of leadership that I described a few minutes ago. But the board is a legally constituted entity that does have these fiduciary responsibilities in terms of the legal operations of the nonprofit 503c corporation. And this is actually no different from the requirements that we had when elected ESIP leadership were providing a majority of the composition of the board before the split leadership model. Next slide. And so this is again an illustration of the leadership for the unified organization as a whole, where the 6 positions on the left side with the asterisks I've already talked some about in terms of also having positions on the board of directors, but then we also have the other elected positions within the ESIP leadership for IT&I products and services, data stewardship, semantic web, and education, that in combination with the positions on the left will constitute what will now be referred to as the program committee, as Bruce described, instead of the current term XCOM, to again eliminate any sort of descriptive confusion. Those 5 positions on the right aren't associated with or designated as positions on the board of directors, though there would not necessarily be anything to prevent the folks that are serving in those positions to also be elected as into one of those at-large positions, but those are totally separate. This is important to know for those people who are running for these offices. It's important to have an understanding of this so that there's a clear appreciation of sort of what the duties and responsibilities are of these various elected positions, so that there isn't an unpleasant surprise of somebody who is planning on serving in one of the ESIP elected positions and not knowing that they would also be serving on the board, or being in an elected position and thinking they were going to serve on the board automatically but not necessarily doing so. This is the split there. There is a question about the possibility for board members who are not a part of ESIP. This is an area where the Assembly, as they are electing the at-large board members, can exercise its prerogative in terms of identifying appropriate board members to complement the designated positions that are serving on the board. So, this could be an activity of a nominating committee for identifying strategic external board members who would benefit the organization to have their insights and potentially their network connections or their financial resources as a part of the board. So there's absolutely capability for being able to bring in external non-ESIP members to serve on the board if that's the pleasure of the Assembly. And with that, I think we can go to the next slide, and I will then pass the baton to anybody else unless there are any questions.
Yeah, I think the baton goes to me now. But any questions? This is a good place to pause.
This is Dean Williams. I have a question for you guys.
Sure.
So you said this originally started with the NASA, and now it's branching out to other organizations. Is this mainly a U.S. or is it international as well?
Yeah, so ESIP has been it's been funded by U.S. organizations, NASA, NOAA, and USGS. We have a few international members. We have a strong pull from Australia to at least do things that are kind of time zone friendly. So I think that in the next couple of years, we'll see ESIP start to branch out, maybe more internationally, but we're trying to do that through partners like GEO, the Group on Earth Observations, and RDA, the Research Data Alliance.
Thank you.
Yeah. But Earth science information problems aren't all US based.
That's right.
Hey, Erin, this is Denise.
Yep. The nominations chair, will it be an elected position? I think that's a question we should talk about as we go through this merge, but it's a good thing to flag.
Yeah, it was just the way Carl was explaining it, it sounded like it would be, and I think that's a fine thing to do. It's just, as I'm soliciting nominations, I kind of need to know.
Yep.
Right.
Thanks.
And at this point, for the current election process, we are continuing to operate under the current ESIP Constitution and bylaws, and the updates to the foundation bylaws that the foundation board will be considering tomorrow basically have the linkages to the existing elected officers, but yeah, what elected positions will be enshrined in the policies and procedures document that is currently envisioned to be based upon the current ESIP Constitution and bylaws. That will be one of the first activities in the coming calendar year in terms of revisiting those and going through the sort of translation process into the policies and procedures document. And so discussions about other positions, either sort of ad hoc committee positions or standing committee positions, would certainly, I think, be on the table as a part of those discussions by the Assembly.
Excellent. I just want to make sure it was flagged.
Yep. And then one other question that I saw from Alan Gold was about the abbreviation and naming of ESIP. I think that will, what I hope is that we'll drift toward ESIP as the abbreviation. It definitely won't be FESIP or FESIP. So I think in the merger, we're talking about, merging toward the name Federation for Earth Science Information Partners, and I hope that over time that we can just keep ESIP as the acronym because that's what people know. Any other questions? These are really good. Okay, so getting down to the timeline for action. So this call launches the, actually, maybe we should move up a slide. I don't know which way makes sense. So this call was really the way to begin to introduce this idea to the Assembly at large. The leadership of ESIP and the board have been talking about this for quite some time, since 2015. And so, there's a lot of people that are familiar with this, but there's also a lot of people that aren't, and I don't want this to feel like a rushed decision. So that was the point of having this Assembly telecon just as an informational point. The next thing that we'll do is we'll talk about a resolution that the Assembly will need to vote on that agrees to this merger. And we'll go through that language in a minute. Tomorrow, the Foundation board is going to meet, and they'll also vote on a complementary resolution that the 501c3 agrees to merge with the Federation, ESIP. And they'll also vote, hopefully, on the new bylaws that make the Foundation a membership organization. So October, we'll have the normal ESIP nomination process for officers, and including 3 at-large board members. So we're going to approach nominations this year as if that resolution is going to pass. And then from October 6th to November 6th, we'll have this open period of discussion where if you have other questions or concerns about the merger, this is the time to talk about it. So November 6th, we'll open the vote on this resolution, and it'll be open for 30 days, and it'll close December 6th, and we'll announce the results. So if it's positive, we'll dissolve that MOU between the Foundation and the Federation that Bruce mentioned earlier in the call, and we'll begin to invite members of the ESIP Federation to join this new 501c3 membership. We can call it ESIP 2.0, might be a way to keep the old and the new straight. So that'll be done through an email, and the transition for current members to this, to the ESIP 2.0 will be very straightforward. It'll just be an email. There's no need to jump through hoops. There won't be another application process. And you'll have about 60 days to do that, but we'd really like it to be done sooner than that, by the winter meeting would be ideal. So at the winter meeting, we'll file official merger papers in DC where we're incorporated, and we'll have the first assembly meeting of this ESIP 2.0, where we'll, and Tamara, yep, it'll just be by return email, yes, no, that's all we need. So at the assembly meeting, we'll elect new leadership for 2017, and January 13th, the new ESIP board will take over. ESIP will be one organization, and then starting in mid-January, after the winter meeting, we'll begin to review the current constitution and bylaws into policies and procedures. And Ken Kaiser, who's the current constitution and bylaws chair, has already been doing some thinking, and so there is some groundwork that we've laid to begin that process too. So is there any questions on the timeline? Okay. So Ken, I think we'll pass it to you to run through the resolution, and I can share this. I think probably all of you have the link, but I'll chat it.
Right. So as the Constitution and Bylaws Chair, I guess it's my duty, I guess, to just present this draft resolution to the Assembly. And just as a little bit of background, since I have been the chair for the last couple of years, I've had the opportunity, I guess, to observe some of the processes that have been going on trying to get us to this point. And I will say that there's been a lot of smart people involved, and which I've been really glad about, because it's been kind of a complicated process trying to figure out where we have been, where we should be going with this organization. And I think the group has done a really grand job of bringing it down to a much more simple structure now. That I think it sounds a little confusing as we're going through all this presentation on this call, but in essence, it's really boiled down to be a fairly straightforward approach, I think. So I'm not going to go through all the details of the resolution, other than just to say that there should be a link in your email that, of the invitation to this meeting, to this draft document that's been put together by several people and been vetted to some extent through the XCOM. So now, for the next 30 days, this document is open for comments by the Assembly. So I encourage everyone to go through and look at this and see if you have questions and obviously some comments. And we'll do our best to vet those in the next 30 days. Leading up to the election. So the comment period, I guess, will be from starting today, I guess, from October 6th through November 5th, and then voting, if all goes well, will be starting on November 6th through December 5th. So that's kind of the process we're going to be going through there. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say, is just, in this capacity, just to present the resolution for everyone to look at. I guess we can again open up for questions. I noticed on the chat there were a couple questions from Tamara about board member elections, or who's part, or the makeup of the board members. I don't know, Carl or Aaron, did you want to address those?
I'm happy to jump in. So the board will be completely elected by the Assembly, and I think Carl mentioned that the nomination committee does have discretion to include people who aren't ESIP members as being eligible for those external, or for those 3 at-large board seats. So that's how we'll get external members onto the board. And I think that this is a point to emphasize, that the Assembly electing the entire board gives the Assembly the direction of the organization and a lot more control than they even had in the first 12 years of existence. So I'm excited about empowering the Assembly to make those decisions. So you have a couple of not really FAQs, and this gets to Alan's question about what happens to the foundation. So the foundation's legal name is the Foundation for Earth Science Information Partners. We do business as the Foundation for Earth Science, but we'll update our doing business name eventually to probably the Federation for Earth Science Information Partners. However, our legal IDs, our DUNS number, our EIN, our grants will all stay under the same IDs that they currently have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I might emphasize that this is a strategy where we can maintain essentially the administrative or bureaucratic continuity, so that the merger that we're talking about does not have really any material effect on our existing or even future sponsorship agreements, as the corporate entity will continue to exist, and essentially it's just being modified in place. It's not a new organization.
Perfect. Thank you. Another question that we've got, and I'm seeing it from Ken, one of the concerns that the split addresses was splitting out the oversight of funding from members who might have a conflict of interest. Will this remain a non-problem? So, Steve, you're like right on cue. That was one of the benefits of that dual organization was splitting out the fiduciary responsibility to the foundation, and the ESIP Federation didn't have a bank account and didn't have financial liability. And this merger, it does still maintain that the board will have fiduciary responsibility, not the assembly. And the other thing that we've checked, though, regarding federal employees and ESIP leadership is that federal employees, there was a decision I think in 98, that federal employees could not serve on nonprofit boards. And that was actually reversed in 2013, so that federal employees who are not our program managers can serve in board positions. And, they obviously should check with their agency counsel, but there is this guidance now that it's important for civil servants to also serve in their capacity on boards. So that's a really great news for us, because so many of the people who are active in ESIP are also feds. But Steve, there is still the walling off of financial responsibility directly to the board. So I think that should still be fine.
Thank you for answering.
And I might add that it's both it's a standard requirement of participation in the board, or any board, that conflicts of interest be identified and mitigated or avoided. And in one of the practices that we've adopted on the board in the past couple of years now is a standard opportunity to disclose any potential conflicts of interest with the specific actions or decisions that the board might be making at any time, because depending on what the board is doing and what the board is considering, any of us might have a potential either perceived or real conflict of interest that we need to identify and avoid. And so that is a standard part of the board's operation at this point, and that would, I assume, be a continued activity of the board as a part of its standard operations.
Are there other questions or concerns? Nothing. So this is a quick reminder that ESIP will be 20 in 2018. Sort of appropriate that we're, I think, streamlining and simplifying and engaging our membership more actively as we go into this third decade. So I'm excited about that, and I would echo Ken too that the amount of time and effort that the leadership has put into thinking about this, I think is really remarkable, and I'm grateful for their help and support. So with that, I'll turn it over. I thought as long as we had, community members on the phone, that it would be great to have Annie Burgess give a little update on several upcoming opportunities just to remind you and get your input on. So, Annie?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you great.
Great. All right. Well, we kind of talked about the leadership positions that would be coming up, and so Denise Hills is still the contact for those, so I'm not going to kind of go into that too much. In terms of the upcoming winter meeting, you may see that the session submission is open, as is registration for the winter meeting. The session submission deadline will close on October 31st. We'll hope to have a draft agenda to all session submitters by November 14th, with a pretty final schedule by December 1st. So heading into AGU, everyone can chat about their ESIP meeting schedule. And all of that will be posted on meetings.esipfed.org. Student Fellows deadline is tomorrow. So far we have 10 new applications for the 6 positions that we have. It looks like a strong group, so please encourage anyone in your network to apply if they haven't already. We also just released the October request for proposals for the ESIP testbed. Proposals can be submitted through November 1st. These are for new incubation type projects, and we're funding up to $7,000. This is for new projects, so projects that haven't been funded within the testbed already. So we're excited to see what new work comes down the line. AGU Ignite this year will still be at Infusion Lounge on December 14th. That's a Wednesday, so kind of same vibe as last year. Put it on your calendars. It's a really fun event. We hope to see everyone there. And the summer 2017 meeting, we did our best to avoid conflicts with other meetings this year. It'll be the last full week of July, the 25th through the 28th. Just side notes, the Earth Educators Rendezvous will be the previous week, the 17th to the 21st, and the Esri User Conference the previous week to that, the week of July 10th. So I'm sure there are other meetings that folks go to, but those are some of the common roadblocks for our meeting, so hopefully we'll avoid those this year. Anyone have any questions about any of that? All right, thanks.
Hearing none, thanks, Annie. I just want to say that thank you for all you attending these meetings and all the questions. Also, I want to express my gratitude also to the board as well as the leadership teams that get us to here today and moving this proposal forward, hopefully. And so all of you would expect to see an email on November 6th, or maybe before that, about voting on this resolution. So please read that resolution carefully and make your decisions as soon as you can, as the votes will have to be closed on December 6th. So unless there's other comments, we can adjourn the meeting. Any other questions or final comments anybody want to make at this time?
This is Dean Williams. One more quick comment. On the folks you can elect, do they have to be members of the NASA, NOAA, or USGS, or can they be external members outside of that organization?
They can be external, any member. So ESIP really transitioned from a NASA organization in the early 2000s, and now we have about 170 member organizations, and the leadership, except for the at-large, can come from anyone in any of those organizations, and then the at-large board members could come from anywhere.
That's including international, correct?
Yep. Yeah, I guess that's true.
Okay.
All right. Last opportunity to speak up. If not, thanks again, everybody. Good meetings. We'll look forward to seeing the results in December. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.